Boy, you all were so cooperative. That's fabulous. Welcome, everybody. Portland Rising welcomes everybody to this panel on San Francisco's Retail Workers' Bill of Rights victory. We're very fortunate to have union leaders and jobs and justice leaders in San Francisco with us today. And it's really, it seems all too rare to have grassroots strategic conversations among people from different cities who are all fighting for the same thing. So it's quite great to have some cross-fertilization, and we're really looking forward to it. And I actually started seeing it as we were just socializing. So we're also excited about how this event captured the imaginations of our great co-sponsors, UFCW 555, the Oregon AFL-CIO, the Northwest Oregon Labor Council, Family Forward Oregon, and 15 Now, and we'll hear from them tonight. Yay! It's so good to have everybody here tonight, all of you. And I wanted to ask, how many people have been involved in fighting a low-wage campaign, whether it's a contract campaign or a legislative effort? So a lot of us have been involved and are involved. And we know that in the last 40 years, the corporate and political elites have been creating an uber precarious economy for all of us, for workers. And it has to be resisted in all its aspects. There are many aspects, and it has to be resisted. And it is being resisted. Here in Portland, there's been a significant victory to get contracted workers with the City of Portland a $15 minimum wage that was fought for by many unions, including the union that's hosting us here tonight, SEIU 49, and laborers and other unions, and 15 Now is a big part in that, and Jobs and Justice supported it, and that's a significant victory for us in Portland. And of course, tonight we're going to hear the story of a very bold response, bold resistance to the low-wage economy that was set in the city of San Francisco. So Jobs and Justice here in Portland has made the fight for 15 a top priority, fight for 15 in the Portland area. And there are other partners here tonight that are picking up different aspects of the low-wage economy and fighting back on it. And there are groups that are fighting on a statewide level. So our goal tonight is to take the lessons that we learn from our friends and comrades from San Francisco and apply it to our local organizing. So we want to get insights into how we can strategize and organize here in Portland. Our agenda is simple. After we briefly hear from our co-sponsors, the friends from San Francisco will make their presentations, and then we'll all get a chance to debrief in small groups what we've heard and apply what we've heard to our local conditions and our local struggles around the low-wage economy. And talking about local struggles, we actually, in Portland Rising and Jobs and Justice, first heard about the Retail Workers' Bill of Rights from Tim Finn, who is a shop steward at UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers 555, and is a Portland Rising activist. And he came into one of our early Portland Rising meetings with a paper in his hand that said Retail Workers' Rights, Bill of Rights on top, big heading, and he wrote it himself. It was coming right from his own experience and his own heart, and we were very impressed by his vision and by his foresight. Tonight, he just might have it with him. I don't know, but I'm going to introduce Tim Finn. Come on.
Hi everybody, thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate you being here. This is my version of the Bill of Rights that I introduced to Jobs with Justice a while back. And the reason I had come up with it is because I work in retail. I work for Fred Meyer, which is, if you're not from the Portland area, it's part of the Kroger division of grocery stores. And I work in their deli. I've worked there for 5.5 years, almost 6 years. And I'm still a part-time worker, even though I have begged and pleaded with them to be a full-time worker. I've been the employee of the quarter in my store. I've had numbers of perfect shops where they send in a secret shopper to see how you're doing, and I blew them away with my customer service and stuff. But it doesn't matter because their business model wants part-time workers that are disposable. They've had over 40 people hired to do the exact same work that I do, and yet they just keep flowing people through there and won't give full-time jobs. But the reason I want to tell you about this is because when I was a kid, my dad worked at a shoe store. He worked in retail, and we lived a middle-class lifestyle. We had a car. My parents owned their own house. They supported 4 children. My mom stayed home, was a stay-at-home mom, and we lived a middle-class lifestyle from being a guy that sells shoes. He wasn't the boss, and he wasn't the manager. He didn't own 15 shoe stores. We lived that kind of lifestyle with the same way that you think of a guy working at Payless Shoes today. Can you imagine someone working at Payless Shoes today and making enough money to own a home and have a car and live a middle-class lifestyle? We didn't have welfare. We didn't need help with our bills. We lived a normal life, and you can't do that anymore. And like now he had a regular schedule. He had a couple of days off every week and went to work at the same time every day. I work at a store where sometimes I start at 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes I start at 5 o'clock at night. And my schedule goes any time of those days. I can be there almost any time of the day or night. We have things called turn and burns. I had a shift just last week where I got done at 11 o'clock at night on Saturday night, and I'm scheduled to be back at work at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning the next day. This kind of stuff is just normal in the retail business. And we can change that. What these people in San Francisco have done is they've looked at what these corporations were doing to their workers and said, you know what, we can change that. And like working at Kroger, they are the #1 grocery retailer in the United States. They're the seventh largest retailer in the world. They have over 2,600 stores in 34 states. Last year they did $108 billion in sales, and this is a nice one. Their stock this year is the darling of Wall Street. It's up 71.5% in the last year, and yet I went 2 years without a raise, and then I got a 25-cent raise. And let me tell you, I've got it good because I'm a union retail worker. I've got a better deal than most retail workers in this city. I have a defined pension plan. If I live to be 107 years old, I'm still going to get a check from Kroger. But the people working at Walmart and Target and those places, they don't have anything like that. I've actually got it good. So, we need to fight for all the retail workers. If my job is this bad being union, can you imagine what it's like not being union? A couple other notes here. Our CEO made $8.8 million in 2013. That's 366 times more than I made in 2013. I mean, that's the difference between why my dad made a reasonable living and why we don't make a reasonable living today is because things have completely gotten out of balance. And we need to fix that. And I'll just wind it up by saying, in 2013, the Oregon legislature passed a bill 2783, and it protected dogs and cats from being tied up with a tape shorter than 15 feet for more than 5 hours a day, because Oregonians looked around and said, that's wrong that people tie their dogs up and just leave them there all day. And as a state, we said, that's wrong. You shouldn't be able to do that to a dog. Well, let's start treating people with the same respect that we treat animals. Our local legislature is fired up to treat people with the same modicum of respect that they treat people's pets. And we could pass things like 15 now and pass things like a Retail Workers' Bill of Rights Now, that's not why we're not here to start it in Portland today. We're here just to plant a seed to get people thinking about it. But I'd like you to listen to what these people have to say tonight and think about us retail workers and what we can do to make our lives better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. And Tim's point is so important about what it's like for non-union retail workers, and that the need to strengthen the whole, really lift up the floor instead of the race to the bottom on the part of all of us, union, non-union, and build a movement. Just as the victory in San Francisco is shared by union leaders and by Jobs of Justice and the community, it's really significant here, and we're so excited that the State Fed and the Labor and the Northwest Labor Council and UFCW are co-sponsors, because this kind of working together is really what's going to help us win. So we're very excited about that, and we'd like to have a word from our co-sponsors. It'll be really inspiring to us. We'll start with Dan Clay, who's the president of United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 555.
So, I'm going to be really brief, but I am going to tell you something that really matters and something that's really close to my heart, and that is this. Anybody who's running a labor union would like to come here and say, the problems that they talk about aren't our problems. We have our shit together, pardon my language. But, in reality, these are our problems. I talk to Tim all the time, and he's right. We make workers' lives better, but we have hours problems. Part-time is rampant. People are getting screwed by these employers. And we welcome partnership with anybody, any group who is willing to help fight, make everybody's lives better. I am so excited to hear what these folks have to say. I am going to shut up because that's going to get them talking quicker. Thanks everybody for being here.
Tom Chamberlain, president of the Oregon AFL-CIO. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. This is really exciting stuff. If you think about what a labor union, what their mission is to make workers' lives better. And traditionally, we've done that at the bargaining table. But to be honest, not enough workers are represented by unions. They're not. We can't change low-wage workers' life at the bargaining table like we once have. An agenda that's focused on local politics is what's going to make their lives better, whether it's ban the box, whether it's paid sick days, whether it's scheduling resolutions. That's what we have to work on. We're in a new era. Washington, D.C. isn't going to help us with anything. And the local government, what we can do at city level or county level, is where the action is. We're in a new era where coalitions are going to be able to drive the agenda, and we're already seeing that with those resolutions I just talked about that we got here in the city of Portland. When we work together with this city council, we can accomplish great things. And so listen really close. We're going to steal everything we can from this town, and we're going to enact it right here. So thank you very much.
It's very wonderful to introduce Bob Tackett, who is the Executive Secretary-Treasurer of the Northwest Oregon Labor Council. And I just want to remind people that probably about 4 years ago, Bob Tackett co-hosted a huge rally of Portland Rising Rally when we had a firefighter from Wisconsin
So on behalf of the Northwest Oregon Labor Council, I want to welcome our friends from San Francisco. As Tom said, these folks have got it together, and we need to hear what they have to say. So thank you all for being here. We can't do this alone. We need all your support. And again, thank you guys for being here. And thank you, SEIU, for hosting us. Thank you.
I just want to make sure you've noticed maybe that some of us are wearing these shirts, Portland Rising shirts, and they are for sale in the back. So if you want to really be cool, you can get one of these shirts. So here to introduce and moderate the panel that we're all excited to hear is Jobs and Justice Workers' Rights Board member, Marty Hart-Landsberg. He's not only a Workers' Rights Board member, he's also a leader in Portland Rising and a professor of economics at Lewis and Clark. And unlike the vast majority of economists who really obscure the truth, Marty actually forces or pushes us to look at, really look at the politics and the economics that we're faced with, and also encourages us to look critically at our own movement so that we can really learn and get lessons and learn to strategize better and organize better and win more. So I'd like to introduce Marty, and he will take over and moderate the panel.
After that introduction, I felt giving a speech myself. As Lori said in her opening remarks, working people have been under attack for some time, and the great majority are suffering real declines in working and living conditions. Some may be lucky enough to defend their wages and working conditions, but even they are likely suffering worsening lives from declining public services, cuts in education, declines in parks, in roads, schools, social services, attacks on the environment, attacks on their retirement, and those are the lucky ones. Most people, most working people, we know from the statistics, are suffering both declines in their wages, work conditions, and the other problems that I mentioned. And this isn't happening by accident. Rather, it's a result of very conscious policies. Corporate profits are soaring thanks to privatization, financialization, tax cuts, globalization, and the sustained attack on unions and workers' rights more generally. And this means that unless we organize and fight back, we face a future of more of the same, because corporations have no reason to want to change anything. And in fact, their desires, as we know, are instrumental in shaping government policies. So to point to problems is not going to be enough to do anything. And if we want to change things, I think this is probably an obvious point to everybody here, we have to organize and fight back, both at our workplaces and find ways to build strong labor community alliances that challenge the rules of the game. In terms of the latter, one of the big victories that we're all celebrating is what happened in San Francisco, where Jobs with Justice, Young Workers United, and the Labor Council played key roles in winning a Retail Workers' Bill of Rights. And we at Portland Rising thought that the experience was worth learning about and from, and so we extended an invitation to people down in San Francisco and asked if they would come up. And we were very fortunate to have 4 people who agreed to come and share their experiences. The 4 of them have worked out, and I'm going to hold them to a 30-minute collective presentation. After they have finished, we have facilitators for groups who will pass out cards for you to write down questions. Those questions are going to come to me, and I'm going to look through them and do the best I can in representing your concerns in 15 minutes of kind of focused questions to try and get at issues that seem the most important. Maybe elaboration, maybe new areas that are relevant to us in Portland. After that, let me just tell you where we're going so you can know what we're doing. When their presentation is over, we're going to have time for very short presentations of campaigns from Family Forward Oregon, 15 Now, and Jobs with Justice, so we can hear about some of the local activities that are going on. And then, and I'll give you more instructions later at the appropriate time, break into groups with a facilitator and some questions and an opportunity to sort of process what we've heard, think about what we're doing here, try and think about the strengths we have, the challenges we have, and ways we can build stronger labor community coalitions and push forward our own agenda. The facilitators will gather all this, and Jobs with Justice is going to try and put it all together and eventually find ways to share it with the community, including some summaries of what we do here on our webpage. So I'll tell you more about that at an appropriate time, but just so you know, we want to learn, and then we want to apply, and we want to strengthen ourselves. So without further ado, in line with their well-crafted presentation structure, I'm going to turn it over to the four speakers who are going to start by introducing themselves very quickly, and then we're going to hear from Michelle, Connie, Tim, and Sam, I think in that order. So.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, my name is Michelle Lim. I'm the Strategic Campaign Organizer at Jobs with Justice San Francisco. Thank you so much for having us here. It's really exciting to be able to share and collaborate and think about next steps, as we're all moving forward. Just to kind of map out where we're going, I'll be focusing on policy and campaign overview. Connie's going to be focusing on the history, why we chose this, how it was formed, some of the challenges in this campaign. Then Tim will talk about building the coalition and the legislative strategy and the role the Labor Council played in this. And then Sam will then talk about enforcement and more of the worker outreach organizing. So within all of that, hopefully we can cover the basics, and then we have question and answer time to cover more. So following on what Tim said, Tim did an amazing job really outlining the problems in the retail industry. Part-time work in America as a whole, involuntary part-time work has gone from 4.2 million to 7.2 million just in the past, since 2006. And number of people who are on call shifts are increasing as the scheduling systems are working against workers. So you are sent home early, you have essentially, you can all summarize abusive, erratic scheduling practices are rampant in the retail, restaurant, service industry. And that's just a nature of our economy's shifting to a more service sector economy. With that, the problems that you see in Kroger here are also happening in San Francisco, are also happening in New York, because these are multinational corporations we're dealing with, where the scheduling systems we're using are throughout the nation. And when we're thinking about standards in the retail industry, they're so low at this point where you need, with low union density and low standards, you really need policy to lift the floor for everyone. So I'm just going to quickly outline some of the policies that we actually passed through the Retail Worker Bill of Rights. The question is who's covered, right? So in San Francisco, we worked off the formula retail definition. And the formula retail definition is a land use definition that actually applies to any business that has 11 or more chains, 11 or more locations in the globe. And through some negotiations, the Retail Worker Bill of Rights actually covers most businesses, most chain businesses. So it's going to cover 40 or more locations. We're in the process of kind of negotiating some of that trailing legislation. So it covers McDonald's, Lowe's, Olive Garden, any chain business, essentially. And what it covers is, if you all got the sheet, I can just go quickly. It's promoting full-time work and access to hours. This means that you are an existing employee. You have the opportunity to offer additional hours before those hours go to a new employee, right? And this is kind of working towards full-time employment. The fair schedules and predictable schedules means you have 2 weeks advance notice. This is a huge jump from what we have currently, which is standard industry practice, like 3 days. So you have 2 weeks advance notice of your schedule, and there are penalties. Within 1 week of any changed schedules, you have 1 hour additional pay. Within the last 24 hours, if there's changes, cancellations, etc., you get somewhere between 2 to 4 hours of additional pay. So this creates a huge incentive for employers to just stick to the schedule or provide compensation for changed schedules. There's also, so that goes for on-call shifts. If you were required to be on call and that on-call shift is canceled, or you don't have to come in, you actually still get compensation because you had to put that time, you had to reserve that time. In addition, there's also an equal treatment to part-time workers piece. And this means that part-time workers get the same benefits as full-time workers with respect to the starting rate of pay, benefits for equal access getting unpaid time off, and access to promotions. And finally, there's also a retention piece. And this is the basic retention piece of legislation that is for grocery workers, for the hospitality industry, and it just allows workers to keep their job if the company is bought out or acquired by another company. So, as you can see, it's a slew, a lot of different rights that we're all got through the Retail Workers Bill of Rights, which is really, really amazing. And what it actually started out as, and Connie will go more into this, but there was a lot of work to negotiate through the Board of Supervisors. We worked through two Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Eric Marr and the President of the board, David Chu. And it was the coalition of about 30 groups and a strong steering committee, about 10 groups, really pushing President of the board to introduce the strongest pieces of legislation. So, I think if you think about this campaign in terms of components, we have a coalition of community, labor, and small business groups all working together, organizing their members to fight for the strongest pieces of legislation. We work with the National Employment Law Project in New York City, as they've been studying these issues all over the country to formulate some of the policies. And then there was a worker outreach piece that Sam will go into a little bit more. And we also had support from the National Jobs of Justice to really hone in on the communication strategy. So the communication strategy was really a press strategy where we really went after the press and let's see, political strategy, the legislative strategy. Tim's going to go a little bit more into that. So, overall, that's kind of a brief overview of the different parts of the campaign, all coming together. It was, I think key lessons learned is just definitely having a really strong and diverse, broad-based coalition was what helped, and that was the base in which we tapped to. So whether it was Young Workers United, UFCW, we had Alliance for Californians for Community Empowerment, a lot of community groups and labor unions all brought forth their bases, turning up to rallies, legislative events. And so, one thing I want to add too is that this bill actually covers the contracted janitors and security officers of the formula retail businesses, which is great, and that's how we were able, this will cover bank workers as well, and AT&T, so that's how the unions were able to really get involved, like retail, restaurant, banks, janitor, security officers. So, and we were grateful to have the formula retail definition to begin working on this. So I'm going to pass over to Connie, who will go into the history.
So, hello. My name is Conny Ford, and I am one of the vice presidents of the San Francisco Labor Council, and I also am one of the founding members of Jobs with Justice. My job in 6 minutes is to tell you a little bit about the history of how we got here, and then a few of the challenges that we met and successfully overcame. So I will try to do that sketchily but succinctly. I think it's important to realize that we are a young Jobs with Justice chapter. We are celebrating our 5th anniversary this year, so we are young. We started in 2009, and the reason that we started is because we had vivacious, strong unions, and we had lots of great, strong community organizations. And a lot of times, unfortunately, we were not on the same page, and we were fighting each other publicly, number one. And number two, unions, to be quite honest, unions would call the community in to support us just when we needed them, but it was never a reciprocal thing. So we brought unions and community together at the same table in 2009 to start talking together, learn from each other, support each other, and grow. And the first couple of years, we did a lot of solidarity actions, a lot of marches, a lot of picketing, a lot of going to City Hall and fighting for legislation. None of our own, but just generally learning how to work together. Then we started to think, what can we do? We wanted a project that would lift low-wage workers up, provide better working standards for them, We wanted something that we could win with organizing of workers, and we could organizing legislatively because we knew how to do that. We wanted to build our Jobs with Justice chapter. We wanted it to be a mass, as Michelle has said, coalition that we were working together with. We wanted to use the resources from the National Jobs with Justice, which we did. And we wanted to be able to raise the funding, which we need in order to do that, which we did through the unions, through the National Office of Jobs with Justice, and the foundations. So I'm glad to tell you at the very end, after this campaign is still ongoing today, but all of these goals have been met in in this organizing project. How it started was the National Jobs with Justice has been working against our Walmart, right? Walmart is the big Goliath in the nation, the largest employer in the world, and treats their workers and pays their workers and gives their workers no respect at all. Well, we heard in 2010 that they were modifying their program and they were going to come in these little boutique stores, and they were targeting San Francisco and around the Bay Area. Instantly that rose up a whole great mass of people and organizations in San Francisco to keep Walmart out. As we were starting to fight this, we started to hear things about predictable scheduling, about all the part-time worker jobs, about hours being cut, about people being laid off for no reason, and all of the kinds of things that Michelle just said was in our bill. So we worked for a year on doing this Worker Bill of Rights. We called it the Formula Retail Accountability Act. And we were going to, because these are the big chain stores in San Francisco, right? Our first plan was that we were going to raise formula retail workers' salaries by 125% of the minimum wage. They could afford it. Starbucks could afford it. Target could afford it. That was our first goal, and then do some workplace organizing and figure out what the issues were. Right in the middle of this, and I'm telling you this because this is called the flexibility in campaign organizing. It has to happen right in the middle. Seattle came along and did the Fight for 15 and won. And all of a sudden we had all of this pressure from unions and from organizing and said, what is San Francisco going to do? Are we going to do a minimum wage increase? And the momentum was there. And we stopped on the Worker Bill of Rights right then. We joined the Fight for 15, and then we went full-fledged in that. And I don't know if you all know this, but I just have to tell you that in our opinion, the $15 minimum wage increase that would take 3.5 years to get to by the year 2018 is stronger, more encompassing, affects more workers than anywhere else in the country. In and of itself, how we were able to do that. This might not be the time to go into that. We were able to put that on the ballot, and because of this large coalition, we knew in the end, in November of 2014, there would not be a fight. We had no major opposition to this. So we went back in the summer of 2014 and looked at our Worker Bill of Rights, and we said, okay, now one thing we learned, and this is important, that the minimum wage struggle is not enough for workers. It's not enough. It's just one of the steps. As the gentleman, the brother from UFCW says, a wage increase is important, but if you're cutting people's hours and if you're not giving them any kind of predictable lifestyle where they don't know how to take their kids to school, they don't know when to go to the doctor, they don't know when they can take their vacation because their schedules change every single day, $15 an hour doesn't make any sense. So we combined the 15-hour campaign with our Worker Bill of Rights, and that's what we passed in November after the election, after we won the 15 minimum wage, through the Board of Supervisors, through legislation, and we got 2 unanimous votes in order to do that. So what were the challenges? One of the challenges was this sort of, in the middle of our campaign, when we were getting ready to go to the Board of Supervisors, we had to pull back, and we had to change our strategy. And that happened several times down the way. There was policy questions. Michelle introduced part of it. We had 2 supervisors working on this issue, and they were not friendly. They were not friendly supervisors, and they were both trying to outfox each other. We liked what they were both saying, and so it was the struggle of trying to bring those 2 supervisors and our coalition and the other coalition together to formulate the final results that we got. We had some internal fights with some of our members in the unions because some of the provisions they didn't like, they liked, they went back and forth, we finally figured that out. We had all of these sort of policy fights, and actually the truth is we're still fighting this. We thought we had won in November, then in January came, there was going to be some more amendments to our already passed legislation. The mayor did not sign it. The mayor, he doesn't have to when it's unanimously voted, but he did not sign it. So we thought the Chamber of Commerce, all of these, horrible institutions were out attacking us. We had to sort of mount our campaign up in January and February again to make sure that these horrible 8 amendments that one of the supervisors was going to put on were not put on, and we were successful on that. He put on 2, but we were able to live with that. So there was challenges. It's still ongoing. And the last thing I want to say is that we always thought of this particular piece of legislation as just step 1. This is only step 1, because now we have the Worker Bill of Rights that we have to protect, and the minimum wage, and we need to go, and Sam will talk about how we need to educate the workers, and probably most of you in this room will acknowledge the best enforcer of these kinds of rights, the best way for a worker to experience what these things really mean and live them is through a good union contract. And so that's the next step, is that we're trying to do through the unions and through the worker center, is organize people so that they have a voice at work.
I'm Tim Paulson. I'm the executive director of the San Francisco Labor Council. We have 140 unions in town representing over 100,000 people. And I'll be honest, there were a few of us, I'm talking about as progressives, we were totally against having a Jobs and Justice chapter in San Francisco when it first started. And frankly now, I believe that it's probably the best, most, if not the best stable community and labor group in town that the Labor Council can, with its affiliates, work with. And these are, and Connie is very succinctly, and I hope I can be as succinct, was very, very, very cognizant of exactly how this came together, and as a movement, not just as an organization, but as a movement, and it's pretty exciting stuff. So we have, as you probably know, in San Francisco, we have passed groundbreaking legislation on various things. We have a relatively good electorate, so we can test things out. We have the closest thing to universal health care in San Francisco. We have sick days. We have now, as Connie said, the highest minimum wage. It actually was the highest minimum wage until everybody started leapfrogging over us, because it was still at, on January 1st, it went up to like $11.07 or something like that. 5. So, thank you. See, we have a talented team that knows the issues. So, but what I want to say when I talk about coalitions is that all of the things that we have done have not been done just in any one place. It's always been coalitions. Each coalition is different. Now, it just so happens that over the last few things, Jobs and Justice, Young Workers United are some of the stable pieces of the coalition are always there. But I mean, for example, SEIU was with us on the move to do $15 an hour, but it was UFCW that was more the lead on this particular piece right here. And so we had, during the course of this year, as we were talking about, we had different tables with different people on them. And I think probably the two constants is the Jobs and Justice and the Labor Council being the anchors when it comes to that. So I'm going to give you one example. Over 10 years ago, when we did a living wage in San Francisco, we must have, were you part of that then? I mean, it's a while ago. I mean, we must have had 100 people at the table. It took 2 years, we couldn't get anything done. There was absolutely no way that people were going to end up with something without somebody saying that you're selling us all out. When we did the healthcare security legislation in town, we knew that this was, healthcare is probably, maybe one of the most important issues that we ever have. We did a select committee. We wanted people who put in resources that had some common vision and knew that they were going to get to a legislative victory based on what happened. It was a 1.5-year campaign, and on that campaign we had to do the same thing as we did in this campaign. We had to count to 8 votes. We have 11 supervisors in San Francisco. with a mayor that might be willing to veto something, we have to count to 8 before we introduce, otherwise we could get our butts kicked. And what was so great about this coalition of, and it got bigger and bigger. There were 2 pieces of legislation. So there was a group of people that were working just on the predictable scheduling stuff. There were other people that were working on the part-time stuff. And so different people that were coming in. It seemed like sometimes every day there would be somebody else on a conference call from some law office in DC or something. And so we did end up with, 50 people, I think, 50 different organizations ended up being involved in this. So we didn't know when it was time to cut bait, and we were really getting sick. So as Connie was saying, or Michelle, we had a steering committee of, I think, 10 people. It was the Retail Workers Bill of Rights Steering Committee, and we were the group that, even though we brought in other groups, we were the ones that actually, strategized as to how we can move forward and take care of it. But it's always a different coalition of labor and community on all these different pieces of legislation we have. So counting to 8, which is, when you have opposition from a business community or you have opposition from a mayor, can be tricky. In San Francisco, based on demographics, is getting more and more moderate because of some of the things that, Tim, just mentioned so eloquently about, the type of work that there is and the ability to, stay in San Francisco, which is now officially the most expensive city in the country for housing. And the idea is how do we get to 8? Because we can barely count to 3 anymore. Supervisors, for people that are just there with us on the natural. So we formed a whole legislative campaign. We mapped out every single supervisor in the city, and we talked about who was the best person, and who has a friend with them, who lives in the district that's a worker, and we went to probably 3 times, when it was all said and done, the targeted supervisors we want City Hall to get people to support. And it was always, we knew we were at 6 at one period of time, but it took us that much longer to ultimately get to 8. And it was a really, had to be really precisely choreographed out, because the people, 2 of the votes of the people that we had, including the final 8th vote, was, living in the richest area of town and had pressure from the Chamber of Commerce, and sort of doing a little bit of brokering between them and us. I did a little bit of brokering with the Chamber of Commerce, but we frankly out-organized them. They really, when it was time to fight the bill and we had 8 votes, they were going, hey, wait, you're going too fast on this stuff. And we just ended up signing the thing through. And so counting to 8 was real difficult. And so just to pile on what Connie says, there were a couple times because, as she alluded to, the 2 supervisors that were introducing these 2 pieces of legislation that became one, there was a huge lower house in Sacramento assembly race that was going on, and 2 people on that board of supervisors were running against each other. Incredibly vicious campaign. So being able to make sure that we were going to stay focused and make sure that some people didn't want one guy to get credit, and other people didn't get credit. I mean, we really had to be crazy, and some people dove in and started lobbying without working inside the community, and frankly screwed up the entire legislative process because people didn't know what the hell they were talking about. They just wanted to go collect votes from somebody because they knew that these groups were going to vote for one person or the other, and totally screwed up the campaign. So this took over a year to get done, and as Michelle says, we still are facing some possibility of trailing legislation. For example, some groups are saying we want to go to 10 days, not 14. This kind of litany of stuff that the chamber is funneling in through the mayor, who I'm sure is getting a lot of crap from the Chamber of Commerce for not, controlling the Board of Supervisors as much as we do. So, just a little snippet of the chemistry that went through that area. And I want to do a quick shout out to Tom Chamberlain and Barbara Bird. Barbara's actually schlepping me around from the state Fed. And I just met Bob Tackett today from my counterpart up in that neck of the woods. And if I have time before I leave, I'm going to meet the head of the building trades here in Oregon, Tom. John Bolus, who actually came on with layers and tile layers with another years ago. So thank you.
So I'm Samantha Adame with Young Workers United. I'm a co-director there. And so when we started out, I got on the job January of 2014, so I kind of started and was kind of thrown into the Retail Worker Bill of Rights organizing. And one of the things that Young Workers United was was focusing on was the outreach portion of it. And so we created a survey, and the survey touched on a lot of different issues. How much money were you making? How many hours do you work per week? Are you part-time? Are you full-time? Do you get on-call scheduling? A multitude of questions. And so we were doing direct outreach to two of the main malls in San Francisco. So Westfield Mall, which is a huge tourist mall, and it's gigantic. And then there's Stonestown Mall, which is next to San Francisco State University, which is more of a smaller, small town mall. And we were going directly into the stores and talking to workers, right? And what's different comparing restaurant outreach to mall outreach is that there's always a manager at the store, right? So it's different from restaurants where you can go in either in the morning or the evening and there won't be a manager around, or if they are, they're in the back room crunching numbers. And so we definitely faced, we got kicked out of a lot of stores, and then we would try to go back and they would recognize us and we'd get kicked out again. And so it was really difficult to have these, trying to survey workers but also have an organizing conversation with them, right? And so we got around a little over 200 surveys, and we got some good data out of it, particularly about on-call scheduling, right? That a lot of people had consistent days of the week where they had on-call schedules, and that a lot of them were part-time workers but wanted access to more hours. And so this was a good tool to be able to use in terms of building the policy around the Retail Worker Bill of Rights, but it didn't really amount to getting workers involved. I think we tried to go through the list and call workers and have them come to meetings, but it didn't really turn out the way that we had anticipated, and so that was something that we really struggled with, getting workers, non-union workers involved. I think we had big participation from union workers, but we kind of struggled to get non-union workers involved and really get them involved in the movement. And it's also, they transition from jobs to jobs, right? They would be working at Proper 21 one week, and then the next week they're working at Olive Garden. And so it's also just the high turnover rate that we deal with. So that's something that we're still figuring out how to get these workers involved. And I think with the outreach and education and enforcement pieces, we're hoping to get more workers involved. And so that's the other thing, right? This is a great policy, but it's good policy, but it's even better when we can enforce it and when we can educate workers about it, right? And so right now, in San Francisco, we have a very special Office of Labor Standards Enforcement, and so they are a city agency that deals with city ordinances. So in San Francisco, they cover minimum wage, paid sick leave, healthcare security ordinance, beyond the box, and they're also going to be covering the retail worker rights. And so they're going to be the ones that are going after their employers and telling them, hey, you broke this law. But we have a worker rights community collaborative that works with the city of San Francisco. And so Young Workers United is a part of that, and we deal with the outreach and education. And then we also deal with referring cases and claims to the city. And so this is what's going to be really important, right? And really going to be the test of this policy. And so currently, we are trying to get more funding from the city and be able to get one or two full-time positions to focus solely on the Retail Worker Bill of Rights and to do this outreach and education. Because as Michelle said, it's very complicated, right? And you need full-time people to be able to focus on educating these workers. And currently, Young Workers United's approach to it is we do class presentations at City College of San Francisco and San Francisco State University. And we also do presentations to other community organizations about the different city ordinances. And so we are trying to figure out how to create a workshop solely based on the Retail Worker Bill of Rights, because there really has to be one workshop and educational piece dedicated solely to this. We can't include it in our normal Know Your Rights training just because it's so complicated. And so we're currently going to be focusing on outreach to the universities, but also just store outreach and doing one-on-one conversations at the work sites and telling people that this is going to be in effect and these are the issues, and if they have issues, they can come to these various organizations. But we also want to be able to create community or committees, right? Specifically, let's say at Westfield Mall, have a committee of workers where you have at work at the mall. And so the idea, I think Connie mentioned it, right, is to eventually get them involved in a union or a part of a union. But for the meantime, it's definitely about having them know their rights and having them be able to tell their friend and their coworker, hey, the boss broke the law and this is where you can go and this is how we're going to enforce it. So I think we're still trying to figure out the kinks to it and figure out how we're actually going to give a spiel about all of this in a concrete manner where workers can digest it and where workers can understand it and really enforce it. And it's going to be a lot about teaching workers how to track their hours, right? A lot of people already do, but it's definitely telling them you need to track your hours and you need to be aware of what your boss is doing. Because it's really small things, right? It's the 2 weeks of advance notice, but the penalty kicks in at a week. So they need to be aware and saying, hey, my boss changed the schedule after the week's notice. So that's definitely something that we're trying to figure out how to do in a concrete manner.
So lots of good questions. Happily, many of them grouped together. Some of them, can't get to all of them. But let me just start one at a time, and people can sort of self-select how they want to respond. One of the first ones was on the communication strategy, and the question is, there are workers, there's the general public, there are officials. What was the kind of messaging? And did it differ by those constituents? And how did you get the message out? What was the nature of the mechanism that you used to communicate with different people?
So we, like I was saying before, we really focused on the press strategy. So we had created a website with National Jobs with Justice, and the messaging on the website was really geared towards the press. Right, and that was effective because that was the message that was carried through in many of the articles. I think there are probably like 100 articles on this nationally, and they took our messaging. We used some of the, there's a messaging guide from Center for Communities Change of phrases to use that really sticks with like the general public and the media. So that was really helpful. And in terms of to our own community, a lot of that messaging was through one-on-one meetings. We had internal talking points, and then, one-on-one conversations with workers. But, I think what we focused on was using the messaging guide through the CCC, and then translating that into focusing that for press.
Just real quickly, I want to give a big shout out to the National Jobs of Justice because they really handled our communications. I mean, it was something that as a new Jobs of Justice, we're pretty sophisticated and very smart, but it was really nice to have the National step in and hear all of the things that Michelle just said. The other thing is, it didn't matter who we were talking to, we lifted the workers' voices up. We always had workers coming, speaking on their behalf, telling a personal story of how this would really enhance their lives, and that was the most effective.
So one other thing is, Connie mentioned it, but looping in the 5 to 15. So we would kind of hook them with the 5 to 15 and then also talk about the Retail Worker Bill of Rights. So when we were in the middle of both of the campaigns, we outreached on both topics and kind of linked them together. And we had a petition that workers were signing regarding both of them, both of those causes. So that's something that we used, and that allowed us to do collect stories of workers and how the 515 would help them and how the Retail Worker Bill of Rights would help them.
I guess we all looked up. So we got a lot of earned media also. We did legislative hearings and press conferences and what have you. Still using common messaging that we worked on for quite a while. I mean, there was a lot of just interest on the natural from the press on this one.
So let me follow up with on that and then move to his questions. But there are many questions about the coalitions. And I guess one of mine, just from hearing you, is to what extent were you all giving a message, or to what extent did coalition partners actually work with their own membership to develop understandings and things? So in other words, How deep did that messaging go, and was that used to build the different parts of the coalition? But let me sort of add on to that, the whole coalition question. There were questions about, give some examples of who's in the coalition. There was questions about whether the coalition collectively developed strategy, or was there sort of a brain trust? There were questions about asking for a little more information on what some of the lines of disagreements were. And questions about how deep the organizing went. Was it really coalition leadership, or to what extent did people from the different coalition groups actually feel like they were part and come together in the process? And last, what have been the gains from victory? In what sense has the coalition gotten stronger or not? So lots of coalition questions.
So I'll just start. We had a very broad coalition of unions and community groups. The one part that I didn't say that I was very proud of is for the first time in San Francisco, at least that I know of, we brought in small businesses. There was a small business organization called SF Loma, San Francisco, locally owned Merchants Association, and they helped guide some of our messaging, if you will, to what was the best way to deal with small businesses, and they helped testify. So I think, and then the other thing I wanted to say is what Tim was saying, that the broad-based coalition, we met, we talked, we educated, they went back to their members and talked to their members, but the major decisions of the coalition were representatives from those in about 10 to 12 people who came almost weekly towards the last 3 or 4 months. And together, the three of us, or not the three of us, the 12 of us, would really strategize and make those decisions. So it was a smaller, we got input from the national, we worked with national representatives too. That was through the help of Jobs with Justice National to introduce us to all of these employment attorneys and people who were working in New York and people in Chicago. We were talking to all of those people, but in the end, the decisions actually were done by this steering committee made of 12 people.
Why don't you, Michelle, can you list those 12 people who were picked?
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, we had UFCW, the States Council, the Western States Council was really involved with their two locals, Local 5, 645 and 648. We had SEIU, USWW, and that's the security officers. And then we had SOMCAN, South of Market, Action Network, Young Workers United, ACE, they're another community organization. We had Communication Workers of America. We had Donna Levitt from the Enforcement Agency in San Francisco Office of Labor Standards. We had supervisors. We worked with the supervisor, Mars supervisor.
And they were part of the coalition, the supervisors?
Yes.
They were drafting the stuff. They told them to draft.
The aides came all the time, and the supervisors came occasionally.
Am I missing anyone else that's here?
Coalition of the willing and ready to put resources.
And you mentioned, though, despite the coalition of the willing, you mentioned there were some disagreements. What were some of the lines of those disagreements, and what kinds of issues did they involve?
One of the biggest issues we had, one of the biggest disagreements was around the assembly race that Tim alluded to earlier. It was a really, really competitive assembly race that divided the groups in Jobs with Justice. Some groups wanted David Campos, who was, the champion of progressive issues, and then David Chu, who was one of our co-authors of the legislation. He was the other person running for assembly. So that was a difficult process to navigate. Trying to figure out. Some unions were very upset that David Chu was leading this, even though he was, their main opponent in the assembly race.
So I think another one, to be honest, was the bringing of the two coalitions together and trying to form some kind of unity. These people who were a coalition around the predictable scheduling and all were very, very, very strident in their positions, even though they didn't have really strong organizations to back them up. They were like think tank people, lawyers, and policy people. So when it came down to actually finally deciding on the legislation and compromises. I mean, legislation, what do they call it? Sausage, right? It's like you have to sort of make compromises, and you're happy with the outcome generally, but it's never exactly what you wanted at the beginning. These people from this other coalition had a real, in my opinion, hard time grasping the reality of getting it passed unanimously or even 8 votes, as Tim was alluding to. And the way to do that, they didn't have experience in San Francisco. Some of them were national people, state people. They kept flowing in, and everybody had their wish list. We all want a big wish list, and we had to spend, and Huey was there, we had to spend hours of meeting as we brought this new coalition to work with. We wanted them, we loved their ideas, we wanted something about predictable scheduling and timesheet stuff. But we had difficulty in reaching a resolution, which we ultimately did, but it took a long time.
Yeah, we wanted to win.
That's
We
right.
didn't want to come up with a nice little blue paper,
Right.
that talked about what we wanted. Just one little anecdote, I almost forgot about this, but about a year and a half ago, the supervisor who succeeded, who's now in our assembly, actually called me up and said, Tim, I'm introducing legislation tomorrow for the November ballot that's going to put predictable scheduling on the ballot. I said, well, have you talked to the UFCW? No. All they did was say, this is what I want to do. I said, you're not going to get 1 ounce of political capital out of the Labor Council on this. Fuck that noise. This isn't the way we do stuff. He wanted to boost his credibility as a progressive by doing this stuff without organizing around it. I almost forgot about that. We had the brain and that side of the piece in so that it was going to be reflected in what the bigger picture of the coalition was going to be on. So things can go off the track in no time unless there are good organizers that are making sure that everybody's being talked to and then you have consensus. Because start with legislation before you have some votes and some other community groups and the power, it can go off the rails in no time.
Moving on to another question. This has to do with the resistance that you met. Personalizing it here in Oregon, and a lot of places, 15 now is very popular. When it begins to catch on, we see stories in our local newspaper, the Oregonian, designed to misrepresent and to sort of, oh, this will never work, it will never be helpful. A lot of the questions, some of the questions that we're dealing with, you're going after these big retailers who obviously have a lot of media money and ability to project their message. What kind of stories were they telling? How are they trying to undermine this, and what kinds of ways did you decide to use to respond?
I guess I'll
Go ahead.
So I think first of all, I said this morning too, we did a little homework. And so UC Berkeley Labor Center is a powerful institution in the Bay Area that does all sorts of studies and analysis. And they had done a study on mandates called Mandates Work, first of all. So all the scare about the minimum wage and the sick leave and the health care, all of that was already put to rest. And if it wasn't, then we brought it out and to say that it only enhances workers' lives, it doesn't demise and finish off businesses in any capacity, or maybe a slight capacity or not. So they did a study for us on the Worker Bill of Rights as well, and looking around the country. And so we were prepared with some of those arguments. That's the one thing. The other thing was, because of this SF Loma connection, or the small business connection in our work there, and the supervisor who we worked with had been working in the community with small businesses for, the last 10 years as they, one thing I just wanted to say about this formula retail definition of San Francisco, we are unique this way, but you don't have to define it that way. That was just how we defined it. So this formula retail went within a year of us doing it to the definition that Michelle was saying, from the city, a neighborhood that had 11 locations, to by the time we passed our legislation, it was 20 locations all around the world. So there was one, like for instance, one clothes shop on Hay Street near where I live that was a massive chain store in France, but only had one store in Hayes, and they had to go through hoops to get this. And our formula retail bill, Worker Bill of Rights, will affect them. So, bringing forward businesses was one of our most powerful things. Small business, and we had 3 or 4 who were willing to come and publicly testify, write letters to the editor, and all of those things.
Including Costco.
Costco was one of them.
Costco said, so, and we were, every time someone would bring up an answer about, how this isn't gonna work for this industry or that industry, it's like, give us examples. Give us examples, and frankly, the opposition was pretty weak in terms of coming against stuff. It was more ideological, we don't want to be told what to do, but they couldn't come up with any real reasons why anybody was going to, be affected by this stuff. So, we monitored, this, quite a bit.
This is even, one more thing, this is even, this sort of predictable scheduling, it's like this just-in-time scheduling, it's all computerized, that's how they tell you when to go home, because there's only 3 customers and they're buying one thing, so you go home and I'm not gonna pay you, and come back tomorrow maybe if I call you. Well, when employers started to say, well, this is what we do, it'll cost too much, it's impossible to change our ways, we started to talk to computer people who have designed systems. They're not perfect, everybody knows what a computer system is and how it's never totally effective. But we had those resources to give to those employers handy when they started to say it was impossible to do.
Next question. Someone, I'm sorry, I can't remember which one mentioned, but this was step 1. And the next step is going to be to try and increase the ability of workers to defend their rights with what was one, that was a union. And there were a couple of questions that raised a bigger next step, which maybe goes beyond that step, and that is developing an understanding and a willingness to challenge the broader corporate agenda. And so the questions revolved around in what ways did this campaign support development of that understanding? In what ways were decisions made to restrict the focus to win this? How did the organizers, how did that coalition think about the goals, short-term, long-term, for a struggle like this?
I think most people know that there are 2 unions in particular that are making this a national case, for strategically. SEIU is doing the Fight for 15 for fast food workers, and we're all involved in that. They're kind of leading that in terms of resource. And then it's the, Walmart, our Walmart, is going on. And so we're on the streets, all over the place. We sometimes joke in San Francisco because the many issues that we're asked to deal with in San Francisco, being a media town and a progressive town. The Fight for 15 is something we probably haven't, except for locally, done quite as much on. But just this month, on April 1st and April 15th, this message is going to continue all over California as part of the organizing that's going on. The State Federation of Labor in California picked 3 campaigns in which everybody's going to get in on. In other words, if you're a nurse and you're talking about a construction job, the nurses will throw into it was all vetted through political organizing, the organizing directors of the union statewide, and 3 of them were picked, and they're in progress right now. One of them is the Walmart campaign. Let's make a difference in California with Walmart. Let's beat the piss out of these guys in California, picket their places. Every single Walmart store is going to be, I forget if it's April 1st or April 1st, on the 15th. We're going to have people leafleting every single Walmart store in California. So that's the message. It's organic. It's organic. I can't say, in the year 2019 we're going to have our first union Walmart store. But we're doing some of this other stuff. Security officers in Silicon Valley who are, we have the tech people making good money, smart, middle class, kids come out of college, and some of them might be in this room, can go right into the middle class. We love that. But, the income disparity that happens to be in there, janitors and security officers, food service that work for Apple and Google and what have you. We took on that campaign on behalf of security officers. It's all about living wages, and Silicon Valley can afford that kind of stuff. And we've kicked out non-union, as a coalition, statewide, by picking the Apple stores and doing civil disobediences. We've kicked out 2 non-union, big non-union security companies at Apple and Google. They got rid of them. There's not recognition for the unions yet, for SEIU, but they kicked out the bad contractor, as part of this campaign. And so it's as you were saying, Connie,
taking all of their resources and using it for their own greed and not respecting their workers and treating their workers like products, right? And giving them that. We took it head on and we said, what we're trying to do with this simple worker bill of rights is change the largest corporations in this country's way that they treat workers. And that's the challenge, that's the way we talked about it, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, I should discipline myself. We've had a little more than 15 minutes of questions, so I'm going to stop. More interesting questions about enforcement, lots of things. Hopefully when this is over, people can pursue these conversations and there'll be ways for us to get more information. And of course, as we push ahead with our own issues, we'll be, covering similar roads to have to decide, what's strategic for us. But I want to thank the panel very much for their time and for sharing all the things they've done. So as I mentioned before, what we're going to do now is have some very brief presentations from 3 groups who are doing involved in important organizing campaigns here. And then we're going to have you divide into discussion groups. And I'll explain how that will work in a minute. But first, I want to ask if the representative from Family Forward Oregon is here, a representative from 15 Now, and a representative from Job with Justice could come up here, 3 of you. And maybe we'll go in turn, 2 minutes. Sorry there's not more time, but at least people will hear about these campaigns, and if you're interested in getting involved, there'll be sign-up sheets in the small groups, so you can find a way to put your name down with a number, email, and people will get in touch with you to use your energy. So maybe we should start with Family Forward Oregon.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lily Hogue. I'm the policy director at Family Forward Oregon. We advocate on economic issues that affect women and families in our state, and are in fact, I should first say that we are leading in coalition with a lot of folks here on the Sick Days campaign at the state level, which we're very excited about. I heard you guys mention that in San Francisco as well. We are actually introducing a bill this session on unfair scheduling. So in Oregon, there's going to be a statewide bill. I should start prefacing by saying that introducing, which means really starting to have the conversation with legislators and the public about what unfair scheduling is, why it's so important, how it fits into the broader economic agenda for raising up women and working families in our state. And I did want to describe a little bit about what's in the bill, because it looks a little bit different than the San Francisco bill, and to give you a sense of where we're headed and why we think that this will have the greatest impact, knowing that over the short to medium, maybe long term, the time that it takes to get this bill actually through, that of course pieces may change. But our kind of dream package right now, we are focusing on a bill that does 3 major things, which are very similar, which is the right to request, so that people have the right to request predictable and or flexible scheduling. So that for those folks who have, for instance, childcare responsibilities, they're able to actually leave work flexibly. For people who have set shifts, they're able to know when they have to work. And that they have predictable days, weeks they're working. It's also actually a right to receive for certain people, which is a little bit different than a right to request, which means that if you have family caregiving responsibilities, another job, you are seeking education or in education, that you actually have a right to receive that predictable and or flexible schedule. And the employer has to give a bona fide business reason why they are not giving it to you. It's about on-call pay, so very similarly for folks who are on call, you'll receive a certain number of hours of pay if you're not actually given a shift within 24 hours of your on-call schedule. And then there's predictability, which is about giving 3 weeks for folks to know their schedule. And if your employer changes the schedule between the 3 weeks and 24 hours, there's a certain amount of predictability pay. And then if they change it after the 24 hours, there's a larger amount of that pay. So that we know that people are taking home paychecks, they are able to have second jobs, though we would hope that they would get more hours at their first job if they so choose, and that they have access to a predictable and a flexible schedule. So you've heard all about that here. We're actually, we have some great champions in the Senate and the House. We have 2 bills. Senate Bill 888 and House Bill 3377, which are great numbers. And we're starting to have that conversation with our legislators and the general public. We would absolutely love to talk to folks here. We work in coalition with many of you on other stuff, but let's talk about how we're going to move that bill forward, what it will look like, and how we can get such a brilliant movement here started. Thank you.
15 now?
Thanks, my name is Justin. I'm with the 15 Now campaign here in Portland. So in addition to leading the campaign that won the $15 fair wage policy that Mark will talk a little bit more about, we are doing a lot of work at the state level and really pushing to make Oregon the first state to win a $15 minimum wage. We have a bill that has been submitted to SB 610 that will raise Oregon's minimum wage to $15 over a 3-year phase-in, similar to the 3-year phase-in in San Francisco. And that bill has 16 sponsors in the state legislature so far, which far outstrips the number of sponsors on any of the other minimum wage bills. And it's really co-opted the whole conversation in Oregon around raising the minimum wage. Nobody's talking about bills for $10 or 11 or 12 or 13. Because there's really a growing sense that in Oregon and in the whole state, not just in Portland or the other urban and metropolitan areas, that $15 really is the right number. That anything less than that, whether you're in Portland or you're in rural Oregon, it's not enough for a working family to survive, and not only survive, but to thrive and stay off public assistance and really be able to provide for their families. So we're working hard on these bills. We've got a hearing coming up at the state legislature on April 13th. It's going to be at 6 p.m. We'll have a couple buses leaving from Portland and heading down there. One of them will be leaving from SEIU 49 here. So we hope everybody will come out to those hearings. It's really vital that we pack the Capitol building and really show our state legislatures that the people of Oregon demand a $15 minimum wage. It's going to only be the beginning of the conversation. Chances are the state legislature is not going to pass a bill for $15, but we're prepared to take it to the ballot. We're already drafting ballot measure language. We're prepared to submit that in May or June when the state legislature fails to provide a good, decent living wage for Oregon workers. So we really hope everybody will get on board with the campaign. You can visit our website, send us a message through there, and get involved or talk to me tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Jobs with Justice?
So I think, as most of you know, Jobs with Justice is a coalition of about 90 different unions and community organizations that's got a very long and proud history of building solidarity and getting solid wins for all workers in our area. I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with it. Well, as Lori mentioned, recently the Portland City Council passed a resolution guaranteeing a $15 minimum wage for all city workers that are contracted with the city. With all full-time ones. And that's, a significant victory. Obviously for 173 workers that are going to be immediately affected, that's going to be a bonus. And in addition, it provides pressure for further victories down the road. So it's a very good thing. However, all that said, there is a very big problem with the thing that the City Council came up with. And that is, we have about 2,000 workers that are contracted with the city that they're not counted. You know why? Because they're classified as temporary and part-time, not full-time. So we've got 2,000 workers that are being forced to take poverty wages. It should never happen in the first place. They should never have been left out. But we're going to do something about that. And that's why, Jobs with Justice is formally committed to getting a $15 minimum wage for these 2,000 workers. And the way that we're going to do it is we're going to work with the affected unions, we're going to work with the affected community organizations, and we're going to build a broad-based movement, through a process of education and collective action. The City Council did say that they were going to create a task force, to take care of this problem, these 2,000 excluded workers. But we don't really know what it's going to do. Right now, it's kind of looking like it's not going to be very transparent. So, now is not the time to hope for the best and sit on our hands and think everything's taken care of. So we're going to be very busy working on this. We are also, one of the things that's really great that's happening here is we're getting a lot of union campaigns that are putting down a $15 minimum wage for their workers. We're going to be very involved in that and supporting them to the fullest extent of our capacity. So, stay tuned. We're going to win a $15 minimum wage here in Portland. It's going to take a lot of hands. It's going to take a lot of people's energy, a lot of their thoughts. So, if you want to help make a difference, get involved with an organization, consider Jobs of Justice.
So now, we're going to ask you to, and I'll tell you what our plan is for achieving this, divide you into groups. Each group will have a facilitator and a set of questions that can be used to sort of guide the conversation. And not surprisingly, the questions will be ones that draw on the experience of San Francisco, talk about some of the struggles that are going on here in Oregon, and sort of call on us to be thinking about how we process the experiences in San Francisco here to move our own campaigns forward. So if you look at your little name tag, besides the name you wrote on it, you will see a number. And that number will tell you what group you should be in. And if all went according to plan, the number should be no higher than 5. If you have higher than 5, you're in the executive group. So we're going to have everyone with number 1 will move over here, take your things and just move the chairs into a circle. Group number 2 will be in the back there, number 3 back there, number 4 over here, and number 5 in the middle. And when you get there, you should find a facilitator and some questions. Leave an empty chair there, because we're going to ask our visitors to wander around, maybe resource people, sit in and hear what's going on here in Portland. So we'll do this for about 20 minutes, and we're still going to aim for an 8 o'clock conclusion to the event.
The Portland Rise of Leaders in general, they are the second Wednesday of the month at 5:30. It's a great group. We're part of Jobs with Justice and really a center of thinking about the low-wage economy within Jobs with Justice. So thanks everybody for coming.